I have a big announcement. Yeah, major announcement for the show.
Wow.
Yeah. It's officially
I'm ready.
Scoreboard watching season. It's Jays were off last night.
Yeah.
And I was my whole night was ruined seeing that Seattle and Houston were just drubbing their opponents. And I know that a lot of you out there going, it's always been Scoreboard watching season, JD. We've been watching the scoreboards for a long time now, man. You were too early.
Yeah.
You were too early.
It was scoreboard watching preseason at that point.
That's when it was cute.
Yeah.
Now it's August 22nd.
Mm-hmm.
It's the second last week of August. The X is in town. People are going to the X.
Yeah. As soon as you see the X, you know it's like, oh no.
No, not as soon.
approaching.
I told you. I already saw. I saw it around the corner. I went, summer's not over. Let's not start panicking about summer. But I have noticed I'm wearing shirts and jackets into work every morning now.
That's true.
And yesterday with the Blue Jays off and scoreboard watching, it felt intense. It felt like we are here. We have officially arrived at serious scoreboard watching season where you gotta be paying attention to what the other teams do. You can't just watch Blue Jays games anymore. That's why it's scoreboard watching season. It's not just, oh, I noticed the Mariners were hot. Oh, that's kind of cute. Mariners won 8 in a row. Cute. No more.
No more.
No more.
They're a game ahead of you
Now
now.
it's fully hating those teams.
I hate the Mariners.
Yeah, exactly.
I always have
Correct.
hated Julio Rodriguez.
Correct. Julio Rodriguez went from being the coolest guy in baseball to the guy I hate the most last night.
Last night.
Just immediately switched over.
August 21st.
They were like, did you know Julio Rodriguez had a lot of hits? I did you know Julio Rodriguez had a lot of hits?
It's just 8 games or whatever. It's
OPS.
just a hot
Shut up.
streak.
His OPS is 1 million in the last week.
Shut up about it. Shut up about all the other teams. They're idiots. Ugh, gross. So, yeah, it's scoreboard watching season. And the division, this is all done. This is not what this is about. It's about wild card time, and it's about the Jays kind of hopefully weirdly sitting in that 3 hole because that is the most advantageous spot, which is why the wild card is pretty stupid, is you want to be the last place team in the wild card. They're not going to try to game it that way. No one's going to try to do it that way. You just want to be in. 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 If the Jays lose this series to Baltimore, they're either 500 so far in the month of August or below 500 in the month of August. No bueno. That says the Mariners are surging. The Astros are just, it's really, really hard to see the Astros falling out of the playoff mix, right?
Mm-hmm.
They get swept, and you go, maybe they're in a tailspin, and then all of a sudden they show up and play Boston and
Just drop 9 runs immediately.
kick their teeth into the back of their throats. You got to be, you can't, the Jays aren't going to have one of these teams basically fall out and trip all over themselves, stumble, trip on their own feet, puke on themselves, whatever analogy you want to use. I think the Jays, they got to win. They got to be dominant down this stretch. And everyone's looking at that little soft spot that's sitting there right after this Orioles series and going, well, you know, that's there. Yep, that is there. Jays still have a harder schedule than those other teams.
Mm-hmm.
And, man, the Mariners are so hot that I think they're only 2 games back now of the Rangers. Like, that division is a dogfight for the top.
Yeah, they're 1.5 games back in the division.
1.5 games back
Of
in the
Texas,
division.
yeah.
Exactly. And I don't think the Rangers are falling out.
Yeah, actually, the Astros are 1.5 games back, and then the Mariners are half a game behind them.
Yeah.
So it's a 3-team dogfight.
Yep. That's a spooky division.
Oh, yeah.
Spooky.
And then there's the Angels and the Athletics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Boy, the Angels going for it at the deadline, eh? And then just being
had
the
to,
worst.
though.
11
They had
games
to.
back.
No, of course they had to, but whew,
That's the
it'd be
thing
tough.
about the Angels. And they're a joke. They made that stupid Disney movie, and now they're cursed.
The Braves are doing the Angels in the outfield thing, eh? In the dugout
What?
when people hit homers and stuff.
I
They're
haven't
doing like
noticed
the
that.
wings.
I haven't noticed that.
I don't know about that.
The only
If you're
big
not
Braves
the
guy.
Angels,
I
I
gotta
feel
tell
like you gotta. Yeah. Anyway,
I gotta tell you, the only reason I pay attention to NL is I'm full American League guy.
So you're like back in the All-Star games when like they'd get in fights and Pete Rose is breaking people's legs and stuff?
No, I'm more like when guys show up from the NL in the All-Star game, I'm like, who's this guy? Who's this young whippersnapper? And they're like, no.
Ronald Acuna, what?
Yeah, you got to be big famous.
Spencer Striker?
For me to know who you are. Or I went to an interleague game and saw your whole team. Right. That's it.
Or you had like one big game against the Jays and a 2-game interleague series.
Correct. Correct. I do some, obviously I like to lay a little bet, like to lay a little
sprinkle, sure.
So I'll do my research ahead of some games, see who's hot and see what some of the trends are and what the numbers are. But yeah, overall, I'm not really paying too much attention to NL baseball. But man, this Orioles series.
Huge.
Massive. Okay.
Yeah, huge.
So there's a couple components to this. One, I mentioned it, which is you don't want to have a losing record in late August in the month as the other teams are moving forward and you're fighting for a wild card spot. That's pretty obvious. Mm-hmm. But I genuinely think that there is something to this team's psyche heading into that soft spot stretch and their ability to actually go deep in a playoff series with this run.
Right.
If they beat the Orioles. It's like you got to humanize to a certain degree the juggernaut in your division. Mm-hmm. And you're 2-8 against them. Yeah. It's everybody's favorite stat.
For sure.
Jays 2-8 against the Orioles. Yeah. Getting clobbered by the Orioles. Can't hold up against the Orioles. Ryan Mountcastle, the scariest human being who ever played baseball, showing up to play the Toronto Blue Jays again. And so you've got Kikuchi starting this series, who has been your ace since the All-Star break, like just flat out, has been your ace, has been the most important guy on your team. And you're starting him up against a pitcher that has an ERA that's close to 6. You got to start this thing on the right foot tonight. You got to start taking games from the Orioles. Mm-hmm. Again, for your divisional life, but also for your mental health as a baseball team. Make sure that you take something from these guys, that you feel as though that you can actually beat these guys, that they're not just impossible. Because, man, could you imagine the Jays come out of this series and they're down, they get swept? 2-11?
Yeah.
Oof. Or 3-10?
Yeah.
Against a division rival, and then you want me to believe that they're going to go into the postseason and beat Baltimore? No, they got to win this series, man. They got to win this series because of the wild card race, but they got to win this series because they just need to know that Baltimore is beatable.
Yeah.
God, I hate this.
Especially with the mental things that the Jays have already dealt with this year, like the runners in scoring position and everything.
Listen, this is what I think Bo Bichette was talking about the other day when saying that the team needs to be fearless. He's trying to psych up his team. He's the face of this franchise. He's the leader of this team. He's trying to make sure that, hey, hitting runners in scoring position, don't be afraid of what the standings are, and let's not be afraid of how the hell did this happen in one year, the big bad Orioles. I'm very excited to talk to our next guest. Legend, Hall of Famer, Chris Mad Dog Russo of Mad Dog Sports Radio, High Heat on MLB Network, and, of course, the famous First Take. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, JD. How are you today, pal? Things good? Getting ready for Blue Jays-Orioles. Here we go now. Big series for you guys.
Yeah, this is a big series. And, I say this all the time, but Toronto isn't exactly New York. Well, we're not the Yankees. We're not the Red Sox in terms of always being in it this time of year. And so sometimes I feel like we don't know how to act, even though more recently this has been a common occurrence. Like, people get sweaty. People get really nervous right now. But it's especially this way, Chris, because, man, people thought Toronto was going to be the team of the decade. People thought that this team was going to run the American League East for at least the next 5 years with Bo and Vladdy, and all of a sudden here come the Orioles with a younger team, a team that actually hits with runners in scoring position, a team that's young, full of prospects. They're kind of what the Blue Jays are supposed to be. Are you surprised the Orioles blasted past the Jays in terms of that team of the future in the American League East and the team of the now so quickly?
Well, I mean, listen, they got all these young players, and I didn't think all of them would hit. I mean, Henderson's excellent. We know Rutschman's very good. More to come. They've gotten through with some starting pitching. Batista's, been the best reliever in the sport. Mm-hmm. Cano for the first third of the year, first half of the year was excellent in the 8th inning. So, yeah, I got to be a little surprised about how good the Orioles are. Now, they were good last year, too. And they won 83 games, and they faded late, but, they were on the come. So you figured that they would make another little jump. I did not think they'd make this kind of jump. Well, they're the third best team in baseball. I mean, Braves 1, Dodgers 2, Orioles 3. I don't think there's any debate about that. They're the third best team. Toronto is a team that, they're basically an 88 to a 92 win team. You're right; they don't hit with runners in scoring position. I think Seattle's going to get the last spot, and I don't think the Blue Jays are going to make the postseason. I think it's Baltimore, Tampa. Maybe Houston falls off, but probably not. Houston, Texas, Seattle, and the Twins. So, I think that they probably won't even get in. I think Seattle's too hot right now. Seattle's got an easy schedule. They got games with Oakland. They got 2 series with the A's. They got a series with Kansas City. They got the tiebreaker over Toronto. Remember, there's no tiebreaker games if the wild card teams tie. They go by best record head-to-head. And then in this case, Seattle's got a better divisional record than the Blue Jays do, so they'd get the spot. So throw that into the mix. And the Blue Jays and the Mariners right now, they believe. Plus, they beat them last year 2 straight. So I think Toronto's in some trouble. It's a good series ahead in Cincinnati. They showed you a little something, but every time you think the Blue Jays are about to get something going, they drop a series. Whether it be the Cubs, whoever that might be. Every time you think the Blue Jays are going to take off and run, they fall off. And that would be concerning to me. A level of consistency just isn't there in all aspects of their game, even their bullpen. It's not, and Hicks hasn't been great. It's just not there, and that would concern me. I think they're going to win 88, 91, 92 games. I think they're going to be right there the last week of this season. So from that standpoint, that's a successful year. But, I think that Seattle might get that last spot. And, this is not about beating the Orioles or winning games against the division. That's past. This right now for the Blue Jays is about going out there, and this is about winning enough games. I don't care who you're playing. And they do play Oakland, so that's an advantage. This is about winning enough games where you can get that last spot and then take your chances in postseason play. That's what this is about. Let's prove ourselves against the Orioles. That's past. That should not be a factor. Baltimore just beat them 3 out of 4. That should not be a factor. This is about figuring out a way to match Seattle, who's going to kill the White Sox, who play Oakland and Kansas City next. Kansas City first, then the A's. So they're going to win a lot of games in the next 10, 12 days. And Seattle and the Blue Jays are going to have to match them as much as possible. That's what this is about.
Yeah, and you bang on. The Mariners, everyone keeps bringing up the Blue Jays' soft spot in the schedule that's coming up here. You keep hearing that from everyone from media to fans, where they're going, yay, just get to that stretch, get to this stretch. You know who else? Yeah, you mentioned it. Who else plays the Royals? Who actually plays the Athletics more than the Blue Jays do? It's the Mariners, who are also 15-4 in August. It's just getting harder and harder to see those guys fall off. Every night that you watch them, they're tearing the cover off the baseball. They've got a star that they're all falling in behind who's just taking off at the right time. Houston is just this team that has the pedigree, who also added at the deadline. Who also has the more advantageous schedule. Yeah, it's starting to get hairy for the Toronto Blue Jays here. And, if you don't think they make the playoffs, right, and let's just start with this premise.
I think it's going to be close, but I'll say no. How's that?
Yeah. Hey, listen, it's going to be close. But this whole Blue Jays season was predicated on, hey, they're going to go from wild card team or team that's hovering around wild card spots to divisional champion, take their rightful place at the top, right? This was cute a couple of years ago for the Blue Jays when they were hovering around the wild card. It was okay to take a step. I know pro sports aren't always linear, but for this team and their timelines, even kind of like a larger conversation here is they weren't even supposed to be in this wild card race. They were supposed to be at the top, fairly secure come this time of the year. We were supposed to be talking division, not can you beat the Mariners again? And so, yeah, to you, the Jays being, that'll be 8 years into Shapiro-Atkins. They missed the playoffs. What happens for you in terms of the front office? Do you look at a regime change at that time?
I don't know enough about the ownership and everything else. I'd be shocked if something happened to Shapiro. Obviously the GM's been there a while. They fired the manager last year. Schneider's done a pretty good job. They gave him a contract extension. I don't know what Toronto's going to do. But right now it's not about the Blue Jays. If they're sitting there saying, well, we shouldn't be in this situation. Well, that's the amount of money you are. Don't worry about it. We saw the Phillies last year playing a wild card round. They played up to Game 6 of the World Series. We saw the Padres playing a wild card round. They beat the Mets and they beat the Dodgers. The first 2 rounds. So I'm not that wrapped up. We saw Seattle. They had a chance to beat Houston, especially in that first game. If they did, who knows? That series could have changed too. So I am not that worked up about, it's about getting into the postseason, especially in baseball. This is not the NBA where, the 8th seed's never going to win. unless you are one of the top 3 or 4, you got no chance. It's only 4 or 5 teams can win a championship in the NBA anyway. That's the way the league is structured. The best players win. They don't even have to have home court. Baseball, it's different. It's a crapshoot postseason. Anybody can win. I've seen the 73 Mets go to a Game 7 of a World Series. They won 82 games. I saw the 06 Cardinals win the whole thing. They won 84, 85, 83 games. Anything can happen. Get into the postseason is your number one goal. Now, if you don't get in, then you can lament how the hell we were in this position where we didn't have a chance to win a division. If you do get in and lose in a wild card round, then you could say, well, we shouldn't even been in a wild card round. We should have won the division. But get into the playoffs. Who knows? You might win 3 rounds. They're certainly capable. Gaussman at the top of that rotation. They can hit. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to get a team hot. We know they're capable. Springer's won a World Championship. We love Bichette. Guerrero can get hot. So I wouldn't worry right now about the big picture of how come we haven't made that jump to win in the American League East. I would not concern myself with that. Right now, if I was a Blue Jay fan, the only thing I'd be worried about is winning enough games to hold off Seattle. They're basically a game back. Even in the loss column, it's right there. They're right there with them. I wouldn't pay any attention to anybody else except Seattle. That's all I would care about. And maybe a little Red Sox, who only trail by 3 games, who they've had trouble with the last series notwithstanding. So that is what, if I was a Blue Jay fan, that is what I'd be most concerned about at the moment.
I know the Red Sox just ripped off 7 wins in their last 10. I just don't see him as one of those teams. Like
I agree. I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I just don't think that they're consistent enough. And I do view this as a 3-horse race now between Houston, Seattle, and Toronto. And, yeah, Houston losing that series.
I'd also put Texas in there.
Yeah, you think that they could slip?
Texas does not have a lot of pedigree of winning, despite Bochy. They've lost 5 in a row. They're only a couple of games up on Houston. They have 6 games with Seattle. They have another series with the Astros. You have to put the Rangers in that mix, too. So if you want to be fair about it, 4 and a 2. But the only disadvantage is Seattle, Houston, and Texas have 2 avenues to make the playoffs, and the Blue Jays only have 1, which is the wild card.
Yeah, and man, you're right about getting in because this pitching staff has been so phenomenal, and now the bullpen is built pretty solidly. Like, I know you mentioned Hicks, but hey, at least they have a fireballer coming out of the bullpen, which they haven't had in years past. Like,
they missed bats.
It's just the Jays now have 3 to 4 starters, depending on how you feel about Bassett come postseason time, and hell, what Ryu has been doing since he came back. They've got starting pitching in abundance. And, yeah, you get into the postseason, you get a stretch like that. Of course the Jays could win. Of course. That's what people are focused on. But, yeah, I think that this Baltimore series does make things – you do start to focus on that divisional picture just a little bit more because they become your bully. Like, the Jays are 2-8 against Baltimore, Chris. Like, 2-8. 2-8 against the team that was – yeah, it's been awful. And I want to just quickly touch on this. Does the ownership stuff in Baltimore bother you about this team? Like, does it sap any of the joy that you have around watching the Orioles? Did you see the quotes from Angelos?
If I was an Orioles fan, it would.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was an Orioles fan, I read the story in today's New York Times. Tyler Kepner wrote it about how Angelos is wants to build Baltimore a la Atlanta, where he gets a piece of the pie. And the whole thing with Kevin Brown, the announcer, was a disgrace. The Angelos family has not proven that they want to win on a day-in, day-out basis. Today he was moaning and groaning about being a small market team. Listen, the bottom line is the Orioles down the road are going to have some problems because they got too many young players. I mean, they got too many guys. They got 4 or 5 guys who they're going to eventually have to pay. And they're going to have to pay the pitcher. They're going to have to play the catcher. They're going to have to pay Henderson. They're going to have to play Holiday eventually, who's going to be great. I mean, they got too many guys they're going to have to take care of, and we'll see if they can financially take care of that. They got the 28th smallest payroll in the sport. It's only $70 million. Yes, I would be. Angelos bought the team after they moved into Camden Yards. He doesn't even get credit for that. If I was an Oriole fan, I'd be very worried about the owner. Very worried. And that ownership group. I would be concerned there. But, again, they got a very, very good farm system. Elias has done a good job. The manager's good. And, they're going to have a chance now because they're going to win the division. They're going to get a bye. They're going to get a home field. They're going to have a shot, the Orioles. They have a good chance to get out of the American League. They really do. If you told me the Orioles were in the World Series, I would not be surprised. Now, they don't have great pitching, which, they don't have a guy that's, and Hyde's going to go to that bullpen constantly. which is going to hurt them because the more guys you bring in there, the more of a chance they're going to find the one guy who doesn't have it. And that's what these managers do in postseason play. They get themselves in trouble by taking these pitchers out way too soon. And then as a result of that, they find themselves at the short end. They don't stick with the hot hand, and he could be guilty of that. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, if you told me right now the Orioles going to the World Series, I would not be shocked.
Yeah.
I mean, I would not be. If you tell me Baltimore, Atlanta, Baltimore, Dodgers, I would not be surprised. I really wouldn't.
It feels like Angelos is taking a page out of the Elon Musk book of, hey, if I say a lot of controversial things and piss a lot of people off constantly, it'll get more attention for Twitter. Except for Angelos doesn't own Twitter. It's a baseball team that he's supposed to make people love. And so when I read this morning, for those of you that didn't hear it, he said, quote, "The hardest thing to do in sports is to be a small market team in baseball and be competitive because everything is stacked against you. Everything. We're going to have to raise prices here dramatically."
If you're an Oriole fan in the late August when you got 74 wins,
I know.
Do you want to read that right now?
No.
I mean, that's just... It's very poor timing. I mean, everything is going good, and then if you're an Oriole fan, you're hearing about the fact that we can't keep our players and we're a small market team. You want to say that in the middle of January? That's one thing. But now is a little strange. That's a good point.
It's
JD.
so weird. It's the weirdest thing. I don't understand what the motivation here is for him to sit down and talk about this stuff. Like, to say, we're going to have to raise prices here, and then he adds dramatically. Like, he has to go over the top with it. And then he's talking about how people don't understand the economics of baseball. He's going on. It's just like, again, your team is sitting there in pole
right
position.
Now is not the time. Right now is not the time.
You just had your crowd, your home crowd, cheering for the broadcaster that you suspended. You had this horrifically negative cycle. You're just starting to turn out of it. You know, Kevin Brown is back. He releases his hostage tape, essentially, where he's like, everything was fine. I'm so happy here, and we have a great relationship.
Nobody took that seriously.
No, of course not. It was nuts.
He was in a tough spot.
Yeah, no, of course he was in a tough spot. Like, I don't blame him for it. I'm just saying it was a really, really negative cycle for Baltimore. And, you know, people used to look at the Rays, and I don't know if you felt this way, but people, like, I know people who used to root against them because they would go, this Moneyball thing is annoying. Them always churning out players and having a different roster and trying to pinch pennies and win with ways that are not conducive to people falling in love with baseball. I wonder if you think Baltimore is going to kind of inherit that title, just given that, yeah, everybody hates this owner, and who could possibly want this guy to succeed? Who could possibly want this guy to be holding up the commissioner's trophy at the end of the season going, yes, I did it?
I don't think people are going to get that wrapped up in
You don't
that.
think so?
I mean, I understand your point. I think if they get to that point, they'll be delighted. They'll overlook. I mean, sure, you want an owner you like, but I don't think it's. If Baltimore is so successful that they're holding up with Manfred in the clubhouse after they beat the Dodgers in 7 games, I don't think anybody's gonna have a major problem with Angelos there. But I agree with the overall tenant. Today is not the day for him to go expound on being a small market when he's got 74, 75 wins. Today is not the day. It sounds like he's going to get this deal done with the state, with the governor, the private and public ownership of the ballpark. It seems like that's going to happen. But he's tough to root for. I agree. But the team isn't. A lot of young players. It's a great ballpark. They haven't been good for a while. They got great history. So the team isn't, but he is what it comes down to.
Yeah. I honestly thought it was an article by The Onion when my producer sent it to me. I was like, there's no way that this is real right now, today. It has to be fake. And then reading it, I was like, yeah, this guy, self-sabotage. It's almost like, yeah, he shorted his own stock for his baseball team, and he's livid that they're winning these baseball games, that he hates the fans. I don't know what the hell his angle is here, or if he's just that oblivious. He's trapped in his own echo chamber. He's got bad people around him. Whatever it is, he's doing everything wrong. So here, and it's starting to pop up a little bit around baseball. Like, I was talking about this with my friend John Morosi yesterday. Is like Vlad Jr. has gone from a Toronto-centric story to a story of, all of Major League Baseball wondering what was happening to a guy that we thought was going to be arguably the face of baseball. Like, I remember a couple of years ago making the case that given that he was in this division and given that you were going to see him in major markets constantly against the Yankees, the Red Sox, and being a killer of those teams, being his pedigree, the home runs, the style, the swagger, that maybe he would be a face of baseball whenever we do that face of baseball conversation. And now you look at the entire body of work, and it shows you a good player, but not an elite player outside of the MVP caliber season. I'm curious, maybe not so much about your thoughts on Vlad. I mean, if you've got some, you can share them. But when do you start to get concerned about a guy who is a young phenom who's shown the degree of skill that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has, but then it starts to stack up year over year of, hey, this isn't quite good enough.
About it. I think you hit it right on the head. He's probably not going to be as good as we originally thought. 18 homers, 72 RBIs in that ballpark with a 265 batting average is not exactly what you're looking for. You thought he'd be, basically, in that conversation as one of the top 3-4 players in the American League, and he's not in that conversation. And he's not the best player on his team. Bichette is. And I think that is a little surprising. I completely agree. Now, I mean, that doesn't mean he's not a good player. He's a good player. He just may not be as good as his father, and who's a Hall of Famer, and he may not be a great player. And maybe in a lot of ways that helps Toronto because then you can sign him long term, where it doesn't cost you $600 million. So maybe there's a positive to that, but because I don't think they can sign both of them with Bichette. I know he's signed for the next couple of years, but eventually he's going to be a free agent. So, I mean, I don't know what to tell you about Guerrero. I don't see him every day. He seems to be a little streaky. He's fearless. He's got great presence at the plate, but I think you're probably right. I don't think he's going to be quite as good as I think we all thought a couple of years ago. Now, he's young. He's not like he's 40 years old. Was he 25 years old? You got to give him a little chance.
He's 24.
They're 24. Yeah. I mean, so it's not like this kid is, he's 28. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's still a good investment, but there are signs that indicate what you're saying is right, that he may not be as great as we thought. So I do agree with you on that. There may be signs that that's the case.
Do you remember a player like him, though? Like, again, you're a historian of this game. Do you remember ever seeing a guy that was just, had this level of pedigree, this level of star power, who you thought, because, again, if I would have told you, hey, you get to buy Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
I thought Bobby Bonds kind of disappointed a little bit. There's a guy that we thought would be great in the footsteps of Mays. Maybe Bobby Mercer, footsteps of Mantle. The Yankees having their next star. Maybe you thought that. I think everybody thought that Dan Dreesen was going to be a great first baseman for the Reds after they let Perez go. That didn't quite work out either. I mean, there were, Doc Gooden wasn't as good as we thought he was going to be after his first 2 years. That was, off the field had something to do with that. But, I mean, there are plenty of players that are, that get off to a resounding start in their career, and you think are going to be, sure, no doubt about Hall of Famers, and they turn out to be, either, I don't want to say flops because those guys aren't flops, but they either become, they go from great to good, or they become a little disappointing.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little too early to make that point about Guerrero, but I get your point. If you're a Blue Jay fan, you'd like to see better than 1872 and 265.
Okay.
I mean, the Blue Jays are going to defend him. The Blue Jays are going to, say things about him, but you don't pay attention to what a team's got to protect a player. This is what you and I think, the fans think, and there's no other way around it. He's been disappointing. I mean, that's all there is to it. He's not as good as we thought he was. He's dangerous, and, he's one of those guys that when he gets on a tear, he says, oh, my God, you can't get the guy out, but he's not as good as we thought he was. Okay, and he made a good play last week in the pop fly, but he's not as good as we – I was smart, but he's not as good as we thought he was. Not as good.
You know what else has been disappointing is having some of the highest payrolls in all of baseball and being 8 games under 500 and 4 games under 500. What's the state of New York baseball to you right now?
Well, I mean, I think the Met fan is willing to give Cohen a lot of leeway, the owner, because of the fact that they were good last year. They won 101 games. He spent a lot of money. He's got more money than God. I think he's trying to win. I think the Met fan, although I think there's a little surprise they traded Verlander. Scherzer was not beloved in New York. I mean, he didn't pitch great here. Terrible last year, late in the year. He got booed off the mound with San Diego. So I don't think it's Scherzer so much. I think they're a little surprised they traded Verlander. At least I was. But I think the Met fan is, somewhat understandable. They're going to give Cohen a break. Mm-hmm. New owner, from New York, going to give him a break. The Yankees are the team right now that's under the gun. Cashman's been there for 25 years. Nobody's going to say that he's not a good GM. He's been a very good GM, but he's been there for 25 years. Paul Brown did not run the Cleveland Browns for 25 years. Lombardi left Green Bay. He didn't stay. Blanche Rickey wasn't there 25 years. The idea that Brian Cashman is the general manager of the New York Yankees for a quarter of a century. George Weiss was only there 15 years, and he won every year. That has been, I think that is what's coming back to hurt the Yankees a little bit right now. It's been 13 years since they've been in the World Series, won a pennant, and he's been there for 25 years. Boone is sort of baggage. I think they look more at Cashman than they look at Boone. I think they realize that the Yankee team right now is just not good enough, so you can't blame the manager. I don't think Boone is beloved, but I don't think you blame the manager. I think the crosshairs now is Cashman. And I think he's going to stay because I think Steinbrenner loves him. It'd be interesting to see, and the Yankees are out of it and finished, and they're going to be a last-place team. It will be interesting to see, most likely, it'd be interesting to see if they throw one of the alligators to placate their fan base who averages 45,000 a game going to the ballpark. It'd be interesting to see if they throw one. I don't think he's going to throw Cashman overboard, but do they throw Boone overboard, hoping that satisfies the masses? I don't know that. I don't think anybody does. I think Boone is the guy that would be a little in a tenuous spot, only because of the ownership, beloved tie with the GM, which I understand to a degree. But, I mean, the guy's been there for 25 years. Nobody's there 25 years. I mean, that's ridiculous. To have a GM there 25 years running the ball, that's just way too long. So we'll see, and it sounds like it's going to continue. So Boone is the question with the Yankees, but everybody's disappointed. Disappointed.
Yeah, I like your point about the Mets is that, hey, there's at least a grace period here. And how mad can you be when the owner was willing to fork out, $350 million for the baseball team this year? Like, you can't really fault the guy for a lack of trying. And most people looked at the Mets and thought, okay, I got to think if Shohei decides that he's going to go to the East Coast and he's not just going to –
which he won't. I'd be shocked.
Yeah, same. But I was going to say that at least you feel as though this guy is going to continuously pump money into the baseball team, and that this wasn't just a one-and-done kind of thing. The Yankees are the weirder one for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, but also the roster is old and aging, and you don't really see the path for marketable improvement. They've also had some moves where it's felt like a little stingy. Even the Judge contract, the way that it ended up playing out, he got paid, he stayed as a Yankee, but it got pretty ugly at certain points, right? Like Judge started even going to the media and talking about, the way the negotiation was going, the way that the fan base was going. And I just want, you mentioned the attendance there and how, hey, everybody still shows up at Yankees games. It's obviously going to still be probably, I guess, the biggest fan base in all of baseball for a very, very long time. But do you start to worry at all that, that little bit of fan apathy starts to set in, that you start to lose something in a sport where, we've got a very...
apathy is worse than anger.
Yeah.
Once a team has apathy, once the fan base doesn't care anymore, that's when an owner really gets in. He doesn't mind the passion of anger. I mean, that shows you that they care, so that doesn't bother them as much. When they're apathetic, who cares what the Yankees do? That's when they get scared. Listen, you can't kill Hal for spending the money. He got Judge signed. That's the bottom line there. They also signed Rendon. They gave him $162 million on the heels of Judge.
Boy.
So from that standpoint, you can't kill the owner from that perspective. I mean, I thought the right move was LeMahieu. He's turned out that's been a bad contract.
Yeah.
I thought Rizzo was the proper move. I would have done the same thing. So I can't kill Cashman and everything. Now, I wouldn't have brought in Donaldson. I wouldn't have signed Hicks. I would never, ever have touched Stanton. Always hurt. They didn't need a $27 million player after the 17th season. So there are certain things I wouldn't have done, but I can't blame him on everything. Because those two guys, now I wouldn't have signed Rendon either because he had the injury history. But, some that he did I didn't like, and some that he did I would have done the same thing. So my issue with Cashman is the length. I mean, to have the one guy run your organization for 25 years and then not go to win a pennant since 2009, and it's now 2024, if you look at next year, That's a long time. And I don't want to hear about the fact they're good every year. Bottom line is the Yankees should be good every year. They got a $300 million payroll. I mean, the idea that we got to give Cashman credit because outside of this year they're consistently good. Well, geez, you give me a $300 million payroll every year. If I can't figure out a way to get into an expanded postseason, I need to be fired. I mean, come on. He's got a $300 million payroll. I mean, Tampa's got a $70 million payroll, and they make the postseason every year. So what's that tell you about Tampa? If Tampa can do it at $70 million, how come Cashman can't do it at $300 million? And Tampa's been more successful than the Yankees have been in the last 4 or 5 years. First off, they beat the Yankees head-to-head in the postseason, and they've gone further. So they're going to make the playoffs this year. The Yankees lost a wild card series game 2 years ago. So from that standpoint, Tampa's been more successful than the Yankees have been. But he's going to stay. He's not going anywhere. And, you know, nobody's telling you that Cashman's not a very good GM. The argument to me, well, there are Yankee fans who are telling you that, but I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go with the length. He's been there too long. They need to mix it up, but they're not going to do it. And so that means Boone, do they throw him overboard to satisfy the piranhas? I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, Cashman and Boone are bound at the hip. It wouldn't be fair to fire Boone and keep Cashman. But that very well could happen. He's been there a long time. You know, remember one thing about Boone, to be fair. Boone did not earn the Yankee managerial job. Boone was a broadcaster. He was in the ESPN booth. This is not a guy who worked the minor leagues. This is not a guy who, you know, was a third base coach or a bench coach for another organization. They fired Girardi off being in the ALCS, for crying out loud, and losing a series to Houston, and that wasn't fair to bring Boone in, who's never played a Game 7 in the ALCS, and Girardi did that and won a world championship. So you can't feel sorry for Boone because you can make an argument it's a job that he didn't deserve to begin with. So you can't feel sorry for him. But to say it's his fault this year, that's not fair either, because it isn't.
One more question, New York related to you. Are the Jets getting too much hype?
You know, they probably are, but that is understandable. You know, they brought a quarterback in. They haven't been good for 10 years. They got a very good defense. Rodgers is a Hall of Famer. They haven't had a quarterback in a while. He's done and said all the right things. So they probably are setting themselves up for a little disappointment from the Jet fan perspective, but I can't blame them. I mean, the Jets aren't going to make the playoffs with Rodgers and Garrett Wilson and the running backs and a very good defense. Now, listen, their offensive line's a little spotty, but unless Rodgers is shot, and, you know, Wilson with Denver, we've seen these quarterbacks going these new places, and it can be a little spotty. But if you think he's got something left, the Jets will be good. All
I'm saying is, as a fan of tortured franchises, there's some markings. There's some indicators.
And they got a tough schedule.
Yeah.
They got a tough schedule, especially early in the year.
Hey, Mad Dog, always a pleasure to get to speak to you. Thanks so much for giving us the time
You
today.
got it. Enjoyed it.
Take care,
Keep up the good work. Appreciate having me on today.
Hey, take care. There he goes. Chris Mad Dog Russo, Sirius XM, Mad Dog Sports Radio, High Heat on MLB Network, and First Take.